Did you know ASBN, America's Small Business Network, is now available on your TV? That's right. ASBN is now streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire Stick, and available for download in the App Store. Scan the QR code to download the ASBN app today. Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN.com.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of the Small Business Show, exclusively right here at ASBN.com and now streaming on Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV. Today, we're pleased to welcome the renowned marketing consultant, Jay Abraham, who I am a huge fan of. He is the founder and CEO of the Abraham Group, author, executive coach, and speaker. Jay has been featured in multiple publications, including USA Today, New York Times, and Forbes magazine. He has also worked closely with Tony Robbins and Damon John. I know you know those two gentlemen. So just to name a few, today we are exploring his latest book, Business Wealth Without Risk: How to Create a Lifetime of Income and Wealth every 3 to 5 years. I probably have your attention on that. Jay, thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us on the show today.
Jim, what a pleasure. And if I can contribute and shift the trajectory of an entrepreneur's future and their economic their possibilities, it's my great honor.
Well, we are so honored to have you here. But Jay, before we get started and talk about your book, which is an amazing book, and I'm sure going to be another number one best-selling book, as a marketing expert, what are the key principles of effective marketing that you believe every business should know and adhere to?
That's a little bit of a complex question, but
that's a whole nother show, right?
I have to summarize. Years ago, I introduced a very simplistic but a very powerful premise. We called it the three-way to grow business model, and it's very simple but powerful. It basically says everybody focuses on just bringing in, I call them clients, buyers, customers, patients, whatever you want to call them, and they don't understand that's the hardest part. That's the most expensive part. It costs nothing more to increase ethically the size of the transaction and thus the profit that transaction produces. It costs nothing more to get that person to buy more often, more things. And if you don't have anything to sell them, to find more utility value, more ways to profit from them. So I think the three-way to grow business is fundamental, number one. Number two is a derivative of it. It's called the three advanced ways: penetrate a new market every year, acquire a new or develop a new product or service every year, and acquire an asset, which will lead to the book when we talk about it. Another thing that I came up with years ago, and I think it's profoundly important today, we called it the power Parthenon of geometric growth, and it's predicated on militaristic operating styles called the force multiplier effect. And the concept is you don't depend on just one basic approach to generate your revenue, your business, your clientele. You approach it from as many vantage points, access vehicles, sources as possible, because it brings to bear the power of geometry. And I'm going to track back for a minute to the three ways. So we have a demonstration. I don't have it here, and I'm sorry, but I'll be happy to give it to you. You can put it up for anybody you want. But it shows that if you increase the number of buyers you've got by 10%, if you increase the size of each transaction they generate by 10%, if you increase the frequency in a year that they purchase or that you can monetize by 10%, it's not 10%, it's 33.33%. We show the power of geometry. If you doubled those three numbers, size of your clientele, your customer base, size of the average transaction, size of the frequency, if you double those numbers, it would produce 800% more revenue. So I've been focused most of my career on what I call the geometry of a business. So those two are very essential. Then again, these are old Jay Abraham, but they're pretty enduring.
Sure.
Then I created what I called the strategy of preeminence, and it's designed to establish. It's a strategic philosophy or Jim, a philosophical strategy designed basically to be the foundational basis, sort of command and control driver of any business, its culture, its belief system, its market message. And it basically is based on setting yourself up to be the only viable source somebody could turn to, the most trusted advisor in your category. And it has it's got a lot of fonts of implication, but the simple one is you have a moral obligation to not let somebody buy less frequent, less quality, less quantity of something than they should, not because you're going to be denied the profit, because they would be denied the outcome, the benefit. You also can't let them buy more than they should. It's about falling in love not with your business or your industry or your product or service, but falling in love with the people you serve and being able to see your product or service, when deployed in their life, making a difference. Even if you're a vendor of ice cream standing in the park, knowing that when an adult buys a cone at lunch break, he or she is getting a 10-minute reprieve from the insanity of their day. They're getting a trek back to the quiet, charming, non-problematic days of their childhood, things like that. I can go on and on. There's a couple of keys.
That's fantastic. So let's jump in here. You recently launched your new book, Business Wealth Without Risk. Tell us about the book, what you want the reader to leave with, some of the takeaways.
Well, I've dedicated my life to shortcutting the process and enhancing the outcome. And I've done it usually through focusing more on how to maximize the bottom line than the top line for safety and to minimize or eliminate investment. But I have a colleague who's the co-author. His name is Roland Frazier, and he's very masterful at what I would call pop M&A. He's not a Goldman Sachs, but he's very masterful at understanding how to target, negotiate, acquire businesses very, very advantageously, meaning he knows about 220 ways to acquire it, fund it. We're very little out of pocket or none, and it's not really own or carry. There's just all kinds of ways to incentivize third parties to want to put up the economic needs in order to get some reward.
Sure.
And he's always been good at that. I am, without trying to be arrogant, I'm probably world class at knowing when you get control of a business, how to blow up its profitability, its EBITDA by sometimes orders of magnitude, again, with no extra investment or risk, just by shifting what you do, how you do, where you do it,
Sure.
all the things. We came together and we realized upon exploration of creating a book the following: that you can grow a business significantly through through marketing, strategy, any kind of, we'll call them conventional approaches. But if you concurrently, well, here, let me stop. It's got three premises, and I'll give you premise one because you've got smaller business owners to start with. So why start a business from scratch when it has a 1 in 20 first year and a 1 in 10 5-year success rate? Meaning you're starting a business, I don't care how great it is, and just look at odds, probability, outcome. You've got a 5% success probability in your first year and a 10% over 5 years. When in fact, there are today, because there's tons of people my age who are baby boomers whose kids want the business. There's tons of businesses, millions out there.
That's right.
That be acquired that probably underperform every facet of their value potential, their profit potential, their market penetration potential. When you get control of it, you can use my methodology to blow up EBITDA, profitability, and then every 3 years, you can sell it for a payday that is the equivalent of what you'd make in a lifetime, and then you rinse and repeat. That's for a startup. For an existing business, the premise is, why grow conventionally when you can grow through acquisition concurrently? You can acquire your competitors.
Yeah.
You can acquire complementary businesses, products and services people buy before, during, after instead, meaning you compete with yourself. You could acquire media. So if I wanted to own your audience, or I know you have car dealers, I could acquire you and have access to it. And most of the podcasts and the media and the discussion groups don't have a lot of perceived value. It doesn't mean you're not valuable. I'm just saying if I bought it, its market value is probably a lot less than its strategic value, if that makes sense.
Sure,
And so,
it does.
So that's the next concept. And the concept is you just keep doing it at a higher level while you're growing your business, and you can create tremendous, wealth is a relative term. To somebody who's running a small business making $100,000, if you could sell a business every 3 years for $1 million, that's
right.
pretty substantial.
Yeah, no question about it.
Yeah. To somebody who's making $1 million, and that business, let's say it's an industry where it's got a 3 multiple, but you can end up blowing it up to a size and a stature and an outsized earning, where now that 3 becomes, let's call it 8, but you've also created so much more EBITDA that you're going to get a huge payday, and you do it again and again. And it's a much more intriguing concept. And when you think about it logically, it makes so much more sense because you're bringing to bear all these levers. I'll give you just a simple example. And I use this all the time. Let's say that you had I'm going to use a simple one, but it'll be an unusual one. Let's say you sold a supplement for weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and you were very successful, or you're reasonably successful. The average person taking that supplement on a subscription basis, probably, I don't know what the actual number is, but the average subscription is about 4 or 5 months. But that presupposes also that they're going to change their diet. They're going to work out, which probably 80% don't. So At the end of this period, they stop, and they're still overweight, and they're still frustrated, and they're going to do something else. But you have the sunk cost in acquiring that buyer, right?
Yeah.
You know who he or she is, and you have a probability that either they lost weight, which is probably just hypothetically 20%.
Yeah.
They didn't lose weight, but it's not your fault. So they're going to look for something else to buy, whether it's portion control food, a Jenny Craig, whether it's exercise equipment,
or bigger clothes at that point in time.
Yeah, but if you basically were also marketing that, you would reclaim the sunk cost in the relationship. Right. You could redouble again the profitability, the lifetime value of that person. Or differently, if you acquired a product or service that people bought before they bought what you bought, you'd have a leg up against all your competitors. It wouldn't matter if you sold that prefacing product or service at a loss if it was not that expensive, if it gave you access to the market that everybody else is after and no longer have to compete. And so I'm just giving you philosophy.
Sure. And these are some of the takeaways in the book.
Yeah, well, the book is pretty intriguing. It's 447 pages. It's got 3 sections. One is how to find and acquire the business.
Okay.
My section, it's not isolated J's and Roland's, but I did the middle, which is how to really blow up the profitability.
Sure.
The third is how to exit. And I'm really proud. Tony Robbins wrote a 5-page forward.
Wow.
Damon wrote a 3-page an intro. And a guy named Gino Wickman, who you may or may not know, he created the Entrepreneur's Operating System, and he's got many books. The most famous is Traction. Mm-hmm. He wrote the preface. Barbara Corcoran endorsed it. It's a pretty profound book.
Wow. This is a must-read for small business owners, entrepreneurs, anybody in business.
Yeah, and it's very inexpensive. You can buy it. I think it's $20 on Amazon for the hard copy. It's $1 for the ebook. We did it not to make a lot of money. We did it to find deal flow for ourselves. We really want deals, and we thought, okay, if we span the world and help loads of entrepreneurs transform their wealth probability, a small number are going to be large enough it'll resonate, or they'll grow large enough that they'll come back to us. So it's more of a labor of contribution, but it's a fascinating read. It's very provocative. My career has been Jim, denominated by very nonlinear thinkers giving me insight into how to see connections, correlations, implications, strategies that are different than the maddening crowd follows, and thus they've got breakthrough capability. And I think if you read this, your mind will forever be shifted for the better, and you'll see opportunity, possibility. You may never buy a business, but maybe you'll buy a discussion group. Maybe you'll buy a product from somebody. Maybe you'll hire. I mean, this is rather interesting. I've seen people try to buy a business where the owner was ivory tower-ish, and he or she was so removed for the clientele, but they were arrogant and they wanted a lot for the business, whereas the business was really controlled by the sales force.
Yeah.
You buy the sales force for pennies on the dollar and command most of the business if they're not tied to a non-compete.
And that's something. So, and I agree with you. There are a plethora of baby boomers out there that have been running their business too on somewhat autopilot and not realized the enormous amount of potential that their business is sitting on. So I agree with you. For those people that are out there that are thinking about acquiring a business that's already up and running, and if you show me an entrepreneur that's out there that's north of 65, of which I'm about to be in the next couple of years, but then that is an area that is very fresh for people that say, I'm ready to take a deal and enjoy my retirement, right? You can take the business to the next level, to the next owner.
Here's a profound insight. Back when we had a lot of bookstores, if you would walk into a bookstore, Jim, you would see very long walls with psychology, parenting, relationships, sexuality. The opposite,
self-help.
Long wall would be hobbies or sports. But then you go to the back and there's this teeny tiny wall about business strategy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And the reason that that's really profoundly valuable is that the majority of business owners didn't get into their business to really optimize or maximize asset value or profit performance. They got in either because they didn't want to work for someone else or they had a life crisis. But there's so much. I mean, I can blow your mind with 100 ways to take a business and make it perform better. Make your ads better, make your sales perform. But we've changed, for example, the way we greet somebody at the front door of a very large furniture chain. We've tried 33 different ways of doing it. And one of those ways, Jim, tripled closures. No more leads, no more advertising.
Just the way you greeted them.
Yeah. We've changed the headline in an ad, the subject line in an email, the way that a salesperson started a sales conversation when somebody called in, and the variability. We've changed prices by as little as a few dollars and doubled sales. We've changed the way you take away the risk in the transaction and increased revenue 50, 60%. We've added unique bonuses that didn't even seem to conform to what the product or service somebody was buying was, and doubled yield. And each one of those is separate. We have another friend. I'm just trying to blow people's mind, not with me, but what's possible. We have a number of expert friends because I've helped a lot. One is the world authority on strategic communication. He can show you that how you are heard, tonality, inflection, a cadence, pausing can have up to a 300% increased impact on the result you get. Another person you probably heard, and you ought to interview him because he's profoundly interesting, Stephen M. R. Covey, the son of Stephen R. Covey, is the world authority on business trust building. He's done research that there's 13, everyone thinks you're trusted, but there are dimensions of trust that are much, much more elevated than most people exercise. When you incorporate them all, that's another up to 300%. But all these enhancements are not cumulative. They're separate. So it's 300 here, 25% here.
Right.
And you can blow up. The bottom line is you can blow up the bottom line very easily with very little or no investment or risk if you get your hands on a business that has been under deployed, under optimized, And that's about 90% of these businesses we're talking about.
That is fantastic. Now you can see why so many people follow Jay Abraham, as I do. Founder and CEO of the Abraham Group. The book is Business Wealth Without Risk: How to Create a Lifetime of Income and Wealth Every 3 to 5 Years. We're going to put a link right below the interview that you're watching currently to take you right over to the book. If you don't buy the book, don't blame me that you're not wealthy and where you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years, because this man holds the answer. So if you're smart, and I know that you are, follow him online. Great content all the time. Jay, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the show. We very much appreciate it. I know that our subscribers and viewers will get a lot out of your visit with us. I could go on all day. Hopefully we can revisit with you again. You'll allow us to call on you, because I've got 25 other questions that I'm dying to ask you. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I hope it had value.
Oh, you definitely did. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN.com.